Welcome to Living in a Living System with Mansoor Vakili. We're here with the Living Systems Collaboratory with myself and Roxy.
Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. We are so excited to be with you this morning. This morning we'll have Faith Flanagan of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, myself, Roxana Shahadai of the Design Science Studio and virtual, Nicolas Alcala of the Design Science Studio, Mansoor Vakili, Systems Philosopher, and of the Living Systems Collaboratory, and John Crawford of UCI's Emergent Media and Design Lab. We are so grateful to have you all with us this morning as we are having a rich conversation about living in a living system. And this is all a part of the Living Systems Collaboratory, which John will get to tell you more about the origins of. But what I would love to share with you is that this is a project in partnership between BFI, the Design Science Studio, and UCI's Emergent Media and Design Lab. It is supporting and stewarding creators who are focused on having their work connect in some way to living systems, systems philosophy, and biophilic design and principles embedded in nature. And so they're going to be taking the work through the Living Systems Collaboratory, through digging into different structures for art and design and embedding those into their work. So I'm going to pass the mic to Nico and just thank you all for this joining us on this momentous day. It is our first seminar of a series all about kind systems and living systems.
Thank you, Rox. And I want to also welcome all the members of the Design Science Studio, as well as from the Collaboratory and some students from UCI onto this seminar. That will be fascinating. And very often at the Design Science Studio, we use the metaphor of a flock, because we really have these cohort of incredible artists that are collaborating with each other and moving like one sometimes. But I think a way more poignant metaphor for living systems to understand it is one of my favorite, at least, is the mycelial networks of fungi that are literally on the ground, covering the entire planet and making each tree and everything in this ecosystem talk to each other. And that's what we're aiming to do with these talks, and just creating networks so you guys can talk to each other, collaborate, and co-create.
Thank you, Nico. And I am a professor at UCI, where I direct the Emergent Media Design Lab, and also am an intermedia artist. I was approached by Mansoor, who I didn't know a few months ago, and Mansoor asked me if there might be some way that some of the artists and designers that we work with at UCI could work with him to help communicate and develop his theoretical ideas into some form of communication, presentation, artistic manifestation that could help these ideas take root or take wing in the world that we live in. There are some concerns about how art and design relates to all kinds of aspects of the world. But I thought, this is a very interesting opportunity. And at that time, I had been recently working with BFI and had become introduced to this wonderful design science studio idea, which was just being born at that moment. And I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to find ways that we could connect with Mansoor, but also connect these ideas to BFI, DSS, and that was the genesis of the Living Systems Collaboratory. The idea of a collaboratory being a collaborative, experimental learning and development activity, and in the case of the Living Systems Collaboratory, focused on art and design as a superstructure for understanding and developing some of the ideas that Mansoor has been developing over his years. And so that's the Living Systems Collaboratory. And with that, I'm proud and privileged to introduce Mansoor Vakili, who will take it from here. Hello, Mansoor.
Hello. Yes, this is Mansoor Vakili. I born in Iran and I lived for the last 40 years in Southern California. And I've been working on this project as my life experience and challenging that I was dealing with and for the last 30 years. And I would be really glad to share it with you, and hopefully we can, even though it's really a dense understanding of this living system, but at the same time, when we really grab it, it gives us a very simple way of how to deal with the world challenges internally in our body network to the social, environmental, and political and economical level. So to start with, the goal of the system philosophy is to argue that we are residing in a self-organizing living system with an inherent capability to sustain life. And as an overview, I will cover the digital era as a transformation era. Then I will cover the nonlinear or systemic values, thinking, perception, and relationship, and the linear values, perception, and thinking and relationship that we created through our self-conscious process. And then I will apply those to our body network. And from there, then we apply it to as a metaphor for the living system in a body network. And then we apply it to other networks in any scale. And that's the simplicity that this new concept is bringing. To begin with, I was always thinking about this question that if we are living in an amazing, if we are outcome of an amazing process, how we are not manifesting that this quality and this quality of creativity that we are made of, and we are a process of, or we are outcome of it. If we look at the universe as at least known universe, we are talking about 200 billion stars within 100 billion galaxies. And if we zoom it to our solar system, sun, that is made of 97% helium and hydrogen, which is the most simplest element. And through that, how could create this gravitational field that we have to create the planet that can sustain life in our form, from a green planet like Earth, that and from unicell to create us that we are now talking about it is amazing process. And as you know, when we are talking about us, I'm sorry, I'm losing my earplugs. We are talking about as if I'm saying computer as a word, to hear it from my voice to yours is 4 million neurons and cell between any individual, between me and you, is synchronizing to bring this voice, this word, computer, to your to hear it and make a sense of it. And at the same time that is doing this, it's regulating. At the same time, my body is regulating my blood pressure, sugar level, oxygen level, enzymes, and everything too, without any effort. So this is the simplicity that how living systems are able to do the most sophisticated things with the minimum effort. So, and to come out with that simplicity and see why we are not looking at the world with that simplicity and that creativity, we need to understand the how living system behaves, and what is the difference between the linear model that we created through self-consciousness and how we are evolving to that level of understanding that everything works according to that simplicity, and we can participate with that creativity and efficiency that the whole living system has. And then from this question that why we are not participating with that quality, first made me to see, okay, if we are byproduct, I mean, we are part of this inseparated part of the earth as a living system. How come we are practicing on destructive and non-creative and unsustainable level of personal, social, environmental levels, the activities that we have? Where did actually came to this type of activities, and why it is not sufficient? If we are byproduct of the amazing process, we are not supposed to be this inefficient. Then when we look at it more as a deeply and as a major process, when we look at just by shifting our consciousness from a systemic view that Earth is a cognitive living system that wanted to be self-aware, and to that process choose the human network to go through that process of self-awareness. And through that self-awareness process, we created the linear logic, linear relationship, and linear values. And through those values and thinking, we consumed the Earth's resources and converted to the information. And those information, which is mostly on part of those information, are on nonlinear sciences, including quantum mechanics, system theory, chaos theory, fractal, and especially network theory, are able to acknowledge and understand and be aware that this Earth is a living system. We are residing in a living system, and it's a self-organizing, self-healing, self-regulating system. And the main problem that we are facing now, we are living in the digital world that is highly integrated, highly nonlinear, and we still practicing those linear thinking, linear relationship and values. And that's the obstacle that we see, that seemingly we are wasteful and we are destroying Earth and all this too. We are not looking at the achievement that we have and how it's evolving us to the new relationship and new thinking, systemic thinking, observing thinking, and how we can evolve to the level that we can bring the potential that we have physically and metaphysically and become as efficient as Earth is. So to get to understand the nonlinear thinking, perception, relationship, and values, I will go first. I mean, I will explain the nonlinear part first, and then I explain the linear part, and then I compare them, and then apply it to our body as a metaphor for the living system, and we go and then we go from there. So first shift that we have in that perception and in this process would be the perception change, that we are residing in a living system. This belief that we are residing in a living system is not new, it's the ancient belief, but it's been forgotten through the domination of our linear, through our self awareness process and domination of the linear perception, that we are the only one outside of that we are alive, and linear relationship and thinking and logic that we created. To get to deeper understanding of the nonlinear process and system and self-organizing process, we know that the system theory is indicating that the nonlinear networks are the pattern of organization of the living system. And when we study the nonlinear networks, since it's more mathematical presentation of the living system, it will give us the most essential behavior of the living system. And by doing so, we will be more, it will be more essential understanding and universal understanding of the living system, because it does not deal with the substance and deals and it gives us a universal tool to understand, and also for application purpose too. So as far as the living system, I'm going to focus right now on nonlinear networks as how it works, how it's been developed, and what are the major characteristics of the nonlinear system. The nonlinear networks are made of order and randomness. Order gives them cohesiveness and structural cohesiveness and clustering. And the randomness makes sure that the whole system are connected so highly connected, and there is least degree of separation with the networks. For instance, as we know, for human being, we used to have 6 degrees of separation between any human being in Earth, and now is accelerating, and that degree of separation is shrinking because of the social media and everything too. And as that shrinks, that shows that we are all getting highly connected together, and our degree of separation is becoming less and less. And that means that we are, that's another measure of indication that we are getting to that chaotic zone to evolve, to self-organize ourselves with the whole living system. I can give an example for that too, but I'm just going to go quick right now to be able to see if we can cover all this items in a short time that we have. Second property of it is a self-similarity. Self-similarity or universality of the nonlinear network. That means all the nonlinear networks behave the same principles in any network in any scale. The reason for that is because when the living system, all the nonlinear network are made of order and randomness, that randomness allows the system to be flexible enough to manifest itself in the chaos zone. And as soon as they participate or manifest themselves on the chaotic zone, they become fractal. And fractal is the real dimension of the world that we approximated to 3 dimensions that we have, Euclidean dimension that we have. But the real dimension that we all observing in the world is a fractal dimension. When any network become fractal, by participating in a zone, nonlinear networks in a chaos zone, they suddenly emerge to a level of synchronicity of all the elements of the network together to create the whole that is greater than sum of the parts. And this, and when they create that higher level, that when they create the whole that is greater than sum of the parts, they are able to always create higher consciousness to guide the system, and it makes it able to manifest the most complicated things through this simple action, and that comes from this. This is the main simplicity of the system, and at the same time, creativity that the whole universe has through this process of self-organizing process of participating in chaos and being self-organized. I can use an example for that. For instance, there is actually widen the networking, why the living system behaves, or where is this inherent pattern that causing the living system to organize itself on nonlinear networks or all the particles. There is an inherent pattern. The universe is made of energy. That if it has a partial stability, manifests itself in particles. But those particles have that inherent information pattern that mostly is coming from fractal dimension of the golden ratio, possibly. That spiral pattern makes them to organize themselves in nonlinear patterns. And as soon as they participate on that patterns, they are able to become fractal, and all the elements synchronize together to create the whole that is greater than sum of the parts. For instance, if bunch of molecules, they got together on that structure, they can create a protein that is the content of information, the functionality, and conscious and purpose of that is higher than molecules adding together mechanically. So if you go higher on that hierarchy of ladder up from the molecules we get to protein, from protein we get to the cells, from cells to organs of our body, and from organs of the body it comes to whole human body as a one higher conscious and higher purpose and higher intelligent. And from there you can go to the higher networks of human networks, and then add up the knowledge of plants, species, and human network becomes the collective conscious of the earth that has higher conscious, higher intelligence to govern and to guide the system. And this brings a new way of looking at the world as a higher ladder of networking that each, and then from there we can go from the earth to solar system that has higher consciousness, and from solar system to the galaxies, and just goes higher and higher to the different level of consciousness and understanding. And that takes us to this concept of higher conscious that earth has, that is governing this process, and give us hope that is not us, that we are only participating. There's a higher consciousness that has a higher goal, and that's the one that is guiding us to this process of chaos that we are going through. So that brings hope to the system, and also confirms the spiritual believes that there is a higher conscious in a case is working on it too. So basically, I try to talk about the nonlinear network principles. One was order and randomness. Another one was self-similarity and fractal shape that it has, and how it becomes more chaotic, more efficient, and more self-organizing process happens, and how we create the whole that is greater than some of the parts. And the third one is the power law distribution. The power law distribution is the uneven distribution that makes the nonlinear networks, that creates a hub actually too. What does power distribution mean? If you look at the network, for instance, as a one nonlinear system, nonlinear networks, there's only few sites that has the most participation, most connection, but they have a few participation, only few of them. But there are so many sites that have billions of them, but has the least connections. If you look at the sun as a one nonlinear living system, the 97% of the sun is made of only two elements. And then from that 3% that is left, within that 3% is the same distribution too. Only oxygen and nitrogen are the dominant one, and the rest of them are the hundreds of other elements that they participate. So this nonlinear, this power law distribution that is universal too, you can see it in the relationship, Earth network, that how human being that is the smallest participant quantitatively has the most power, most influence, most consumption of the Earth. And when we look at the human network, we can see that how power and wealth and all this is being distributed unevenly. But the main issue is if those, and because of this power distribution, there is a tendency to create hubs. And hubs are very important in sustainability of the networks. As long as those hubs work with the nonlinear values and relationship, the whole system is sustainable. But as soon as those hubs perform with the linear relationship, the whole system will be unsustainable. I will discuss that later on when I apply to body network and show the hub and how it works, and then how in social and other networks. The main issue is understanding how nonlinear network works and how it gives us a very simple idea of applying it to any, from our body network to other networks. From there, we can get to, now that we discussed the linear part, obviously, as we see, the reason this system is that efficient is the value of cooperation, partnership, and long-term health of the whole system rather than just a few or hubs. And the relationship that we have is different, and also the values are different too. We can see on this right now the different values that nonlinear values, that maybe Umar can read those and we go forward.
Yes. Thank you, Mansoor. I'm Umair from Lahore, guys. I will be reading an excerpt from Mansoor's article on linear logic and linear relationships and values. The partial stability and equilibrium of our immediate surroundings. Roxy, if you could maximize that image, that would be great. Okay. Our immediate surroundings and the orderly natural cycles on the human scale have helped human beings to gradually develop an approximate linear model of the world based on a linear logic, which has been the dominant way of thinking, especially in the last 2 centuries. In the early stages of human development, human beings started to use their hands and vocal system to increase their ability to cooperate with each other. They used sign language for short-range communication and vocal projections for long-range communication. They mimicked the sounds that other animals made to attract harmless animals and distract dangerous ones. Combining sign language and vocal projections eventually created a subjective virtual world of information, an abstract concept, separated from real objects. The separation of subject from the object started us down the road to abstract thinking and the linear perception and thinking of self-consciousness. Thus, we have elusively experienced ourselves as independent, separated from the living network. We therefore attempt to protect our separated self from the rest of the universe. Linear thinking is self-defensive, self-protective, self-assertive, dominating, and biased to liability management, resulting in violence and negativity. Linear systems are reductionist and deterministic systems which provide predictability and certainty. When we analyze an event, we reduce it to a few dominant causes and neglect most insignificant factors. Focusing on major factors of an event, along with the proportionality of cause and effect in linear systems, provides certainty and makes linear thinking a judgmental logic. When we are judging a person or an event, the self-assertive and quantitative nature of linear thinking does not allow us to be observant and aware of those behaviors in our actions or values as long as they are quantitatively insignificant. Therefore, linear thinking does not give us a chance to cognitively enhance and purify our acts and values. In contrast, systems thinking is based on the behaviors of living systems that perform at the chaotic zone, which makes systems thinking observant and non-judgmental. Linearity is an approximation to a non-linear reality. Order equips linear logic with predictability, determinism, certainty, and a sense of control over outside events. Certainty provides a deterministic tool to make judgments that lead us to abstract belief systems. Since our linear logic is based on the proportionality of cause and effect, the chaos and uncertainty in the nonlinear world highlights the non-proportionality of cause and effect and inconsistency of our linear judgment system, including our values and beliefs and having a sense of control over events. Therefore, linear logic has a negative attitude toward chaos and change, while systems thinking embraces the chaos as a stage of creativity and emergence of a higher fractal order and self-organizing process. Also, certainty brings expectation and planning. When our plans don't manifest and our expectations are not met, we become obsessed with closing doors and negativity rather than paying attention to the open doors and opportunities that so-called failure event provide us. Linear thinking, with its defensive mechanisms, codes our judgment system with fear, guilt, blame, anger, negativity, violence, hopelessness, and liability management, lowering the quality of information processing in chaotic events and challenges. This indicates the limitations and insufficiency of linear logic and signifies the necessity of a nonlinear logic and systems thinking to explain the nonlinear world. It is very important to recognize that linear logic, reduction science, and its corresponding technologies are incredibly useful tools that enabled us to achieve our current understanding of nonlinear science, the concept of the living universe, nonlinear logic, and even our realizations of its own limitations and liabilities. We use it successfully in all our routine activities, including communicating this discussion with its readers. Listeners. The main purpose of this discussion is to unify linear and nonlinear thinking to achieve the ultimate potentials of our creative mind. The perceptual shift from linear to nonlinear is a move away from self-assertive toward integrative, from rational to intuitive, from reductionist to holistic, and from separated to connected. It also shifts our values from consumption to conservation, from competition to cooperation, from quantity to quality, from domination to partnership, from rigidity to flexibility, and from liability management to asset management. It also shifts our state of mind from negativity, blame, anger, revenge, violence, and hopelessness to optimism, forgiveness, tolerance, peace, and hope. As we shift from linear to nonlinear thinking, we gain a greater ability to intuit as well as to process information analytically. Systems thinking provides us a hopeful, creative, peaceful, ecologically harmonic framework to deal with a nonlinear, chaotic, digitally integrated world. Thank you, Roxy. Back to Mansoor.
So, what I try to explain through this session was how nonlinear networks self-organizing system works as a living system, and how it differs from the linear thinking and linear values and logic and values that we created through our self-organized, self-conscious process, and showing that this linear thinking logic that we have and the science that we use, reduction science, and also the values and relationship is based on this approximate model, linear model that we created, and how is so unsustainable in this nonlinear world of digital world that everything is be highly connected, highly interrelated, and we cannot separate anything from like from environment issues, from the political or economical issues, from immigration and all this too, by separating the earth to the different those imaginary lines that we created and that separating countries from each other rather than looking at the whole earth as a human being and all the other species are living in it, and we are all one, and we need to approach it with the systemic way as a system rather than separating it differently and then deal with it separately. So actually, this is the main issue or main obstacle that it does not let, or linear mind, that it does not let us to get to see the world as a living system and its approach with the systemic values and systemic thinking. But at the same time, this linear mind, even though was approximated model of the world, it helped us to go through this deeper process of Earth as a living system, as a cognitive system, to be self-aware. And that process is over. And by acting with this new values and new thinking, which we synchronize our actions with the bigger picture that is playing us as the Earth. And through that, we are achieving to that higher goal and higher potential that exists within us, physically and metaphysically. So that's why we need to really realize the shortcoming of our linear thinking, which has been dominated, or they call it left side brain. As you know, when we think, our left side brain linearly, our left side brain activates high more. And when we intuitively or artistically or creatively we are thinking, our right side brain activates highly. That's why even though separating left or right is not a holistic view, but for approximation, we can say, okay, our left side brain is more logical, linear, masculine, and right side is more intuitive, feminine, and when cooperation of these two, left and right now we have a domination of left side brain, linear brain, in our body network and also in a society and in our higher level of network that we are participating. And we need to somehow activate the right one to be able to cooperate right and left together and go forward. I will explain that further in the when I get to the body or body as a network. So when we look at our, let's examine now all those values and other and the relationship that we mentioned and we on the nonlinear and linear one apply to our body network. First thing that we see in our body network as a one living system, and then we can apply it to any higher other network that we are participating in any level or any scale. The first one would be, I mean, when we look at our body, it has a power law distribution. For instance, our brain, which is only 5% of the whole body as far as the weight and the volume, consumes 20% of the food or any consumption that we have in our body, we consume. And has the highest control, it has more control over the body network, or what we do and what we act and all this too. And subconsciously, when we look at the body, it cooperates with the body network, with the nonlinear relationship of cooperation, partnership, and working all body networks together to regulate our body, all our blood pressure, everything that we discussed, and our enzymes and everything too, and even communication. This very sophisticated thing that we are doing right now with the minimum effort, because the inherently is using nonlinear relationship of cooperation, partnership, long-term health of the whole system. But as soon as our linear mind, left side one dominates, separates the brain from the body network, and it goes only for the short-term gain of the brain, rather than looking at the whole system health. It dominates the linear relation of self-assertiveness, short-term gain, domination, to the whole network, which becomes unsustainable. When I say that, for instance, rather than any intake that we have outside, as far as the food or as far as the information, the way we process it to the linear relation. And that's a sustainability of body network. And that cannot be a self-healing system that it is to perform at that level. For instance, we take any type of toxic food that is not healthy for the body as a general, but only satisfies the brain, sugar, coffee, whatever that is helpful. Or at night, we are going to sleep, and rather than let the whole body to work together and be rest, brain wants to have a sugar, coffee at that time. Or addiction to information. When we wake up at the morning, rather than using massaging eyes, yawning eyes, go up and down and take care of everything. Right away, we're going to get to the internet or our telephone and see what's going on, because it's the addiction to information. So that type of short-term happens to our network by domination of left side mind. And when that happens, we, since the linear logic has a tendency, has a defensive mechanism to protect that separation, that separate identity that we have. It has a bias to negativity and fear and all this too. And when we have what we are expecting is not happening, or any news that comes, first of all, we are biased to negative news by the TV, and everybody uses that negative information or person and becomes attracted to it too. When we consume those negative things and with blame and negativity, basically our brain, rather than our brain start make all kind of toxic enzymes in the body. And that eventually makes our body as a whole, rather than a whole that creating higher, the whole is greater than some of the parts. Because of that, not being connected and creating those linear between those ansoms, it becomes sorry.
Hi, everybody. We've temporarily lost Mansoor, but we'll bring him back in as soon as possible. In the meantime, let's move on to a panel session. We have a few new guests joining us that we'd like you to meet, and we'll bring Mansoor back in as soon as he's able to reconnect. So we have Nico, who you've already met, and Roxy. Here's Faith, Umar, and Amanda. I'll open everybody's mic. And Roxy, would you be kind enough to just do a quick introduction to everyone we haven't met yet?
Yes. So introducing BFI's Executive Director, Amanda Joy Ravenhill, as well as Umar Zia, who is a member of the Design Science Studio, the Living Systems Collaboratory, and has been working with Mansoor these last few days to help prepare this presentation. And his work is so aligned with Mansoor's work. He's been doing a ton of work around biomimicry and how we look. Why am I even talking about your work for you, Umar? You should talk about your own work because it is so relevant to the work that we're talking about today. Could you give a little introduction?
And also, Umar, maybe to kick off the panel session here, let's hear a little bit about the work you've done with Mansoor over the past few days, helping him pull together the presentation that we've heard in the last few minutes. Take it away, Umar. Umar, can you hear us?
Okay, I lost you there, Roxy. You asked me the question.
Please go ahead.
So, should I answer, Roxy?
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Okay, great. So, so I had this premise for my project for the Living Systems Collaboratory. My premise for the project was that life is the synergistic outcome of the processes in nature, of the design processes in nature. And so when atoms and molecules organize themselves in a certain particular way, I thought that life emerges. And when those interrelationships are lost, so is life. So I try to incorporate this idea in technology. And I thought, how could we make technology alive based on the same premise? And then I met you guys and I spoke with Mansoor at length. I have been reading his articles, and first I need to really understand how living systems actually create, rather perpetuate life, and only then I think I will go back to the technology now. So that is my project, and thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Umar. And Amanda, I would love to hear your thoughts on how Mansoor's work connects in with the wonderful work you and your colleagues have been doing at BFI for these many years.
So Buckminster Fuller.
You
can hear me?
Go ahead.
Okay, great. Buckminster Fuller, is most known for the geodesic dome, but that's really just kind of one poetic, artifact of a lifelong exploration that he had into living systems. So that was his main muse, was looking at the living world around him and discovering kind of like the underlying principles that nature uses in order to design.
And the geodesic dome uses the principle of doing more with less. So it's the structure that holds the most air, most space with the least amount of materials, and it actually gets stronger the larger it is. And so he was often looking for these kind of we call them gestalt switches, where like you're looking at something and you think it's this way, and then it all kind of flips upside down. He's really good at kind of getting people to think, oh wow, things aren't what they may have seemed. So one of the things he liked to talk about was the wind doesn't actually blow, say, from the northwest, but it actually sucks from the southeast. So he encouraged people to kind of look at the larger whole and zoom out and really see the interplay and the mutual causality that often exists in nature. And it's very much kind of moving from a linear, reductionist, overly siloed, overly specialized view of the world in our economy towards one that's way more comprehensive, as he liked to say. He called himself a comprehensivist. And, just within that wind example, looking at nonlinear systems, how can we think of, whenever we're looking at a problem and saying, oh, this is definitely the cause and this is the effect, like how can we say, oh, well, what if they're mutually causal? And what if the effects of things are actually sometimes the causes too, if you zoom out in time or zoom out in geography or zoom out in other spectrums. So yeah, those are some of the things that have come to mind this morning watching Mansoor's great presentation.
Thank you so much, Amanda. That's very, very helpful. And Mansoor, we can see you now. How's your connection? Is it a little better?
It seems to me, yes. And thank you for your patience. Yeah, with this, my telephone, I was using my cell phone basically, and went out of battery and just cut off.
Oh.
Sorry for that. This new technology is really amazing, but at the same time, we have to be more aware of it, and I'm not actually that much, so sorry for this incident.
No problem at all. Should we resume your presentation?
Sure. I'm here. So I was basically showing that how this connection happens through our body network first, by domination of the linear relationship and linear values, and how by actually the linear, when the hub or brain as a hub participate with those linear participation, or quality of healing system in a personal level, rather than being self-healing system, brain is not cooperating with the body network because of that self-assertiveness, short-term gain of the and domination of the left side. And by separating that and only going for the short-term gain and self-assertiveness, our body loses this healing system, its self-healing, self-regulating system. And that's the first thing that we are seeing. All these people, human being needs all kind of pills and all kind of things, rather than being aware of the whole system and using that advantage, that we don't need to go to a doctor like other animals. We don't need to go to a doctor or all kind of, only for certain surgeries and those. But in general, we have the best system to heal ourselves, and we are losing it because of the domination of left side brain and linear mind and linear relationship. But as soon as we apply those nonlinear relationship, then this process of being aware of this issue is in first step. But second step is, if we look at our brain again as another living system, if we observe our brain action or our activities or our thinking through those nonlinear values, it makes us to be observant of our linear actions, judgments, and all this too. And by doing so, eventually, as a feedback system, our brain will self-organize itself and takes away the domination of judgmental, negative, living, linear mind to activate the right side spiritual intuitive system. And that way, eventually, our brain between our body networks become such that the left and right are cooperating rather than left is dominating the right side. And by doing so, we get the ultimate potentials we have. And then intuitively, we receive the information rather than through the linear logic system or reading and that type of things. And that brings ultimate potential that at the beginning, the question that I have, why we are not performing with the quality that we are a byproduct or the output of that process, that amazing process. And then when we apply that to the any network is the same way too. If we look at the Earth as a one living system, human network is the smallest part of the whole network quantitatively, but has the most as a hub again. This is the hub in the Earth. But by applying a linear relationship, is consuming, is created all this nonlinear linear relationship, linear structure of to just self-assertiveness, domination, short-term gain of human being rather than the whole Earth and all the other species that we are living in it. So basically, by shifting that perception, that relationship to systemic relationship will resolve a harmony of us with the other species and the Earth as a network too. And if we apply it to human network, we see the same thing too. On the hubs are, first of all, linearly we divided the whole Earth to the different imaginary border lines and separated ourselves, which each individual country is working only for their benefit and all this to short-term assertive linear relationship. Rather than looking at the human, the whole thing as a one, that we are lucky enough that we are living in this living system and we have an amazing potential to bring out that we are, this linearity of the relationship is the one that is not letting us to get to that level. So basically, the whole system of shift of this new transformation era that we are talking is the shift on the linear relationship from our brain and our body network to the systemic nonlinear relationship and apply it to any relationship that we have in any other networks. So, for instance, if in our political system, by creating a platform that is already exists, that we vote only for those people, or those representatives that they are practicing and believing in those not systemic relationship. That creates a new people, new statements that they have believing on this type of relationship, and their practice is that, and that way we shift the whole governing system to a systemic system, very simply. And at the same time, with the economy, the same thing too. In a stock market economy that is based on growth of consumption, that right now chronically is having a problem with the limitation of those consumption, and also the engine of that consumption, which is the middle class, are getting smaller and smaller as far as their equity is not going to be able to grow faster. So is in a crisis. So by shifting these values and applying and making the companies to play them with these values and shift the investment of the individual level to a mutual fund level, hedge fund level, to those companies that they are going to that, applying this kind of values to that, to their internal practice and also their product, eventually shift the whole economy to a systemic economy that sustains Earth, sustains us, and also it brings creativity rather than just consumption purpose. So as we see, this shift of consumption, this relationship, first benefits ourselves in our body network to be healthier, to be more aware, and at the same time, it will take all the negativities and the toxic that we create, and if we don't deal, if we don't come out with our expectation, it will just give us a message as an observant. We see it as a message that the universe is giving us as a cognitive process to become a better person, rather than taking it for granted, taking it negatively that affects our body and everything too. And so it benefits ourselves in a personal level, in a social level, in the economic level, and the earth level too. So everybody benefits from that, and is not against anybody, but it's a cooperation and a beneficial to everything, from human body to humans network to earth as a network, and go forward. So if there is, I guess, if there is any question, we can go further and discuss it further. And I'm here to have any personal timing as well as calling and discussing it as a mentor to anyone if you're interested.
So does anyone want to address Rock's interesting question, comment related to the tendrils of multi-directional relationships? Maybe that connects back to this question of who benefits from this concept. Mansoor?
I can hear you. I couldn't understand. What was the question?
So there was, related to the question that you posted on your slide, who benefits from this concept, one of our listeners posted, what has this to do with everything else? And he's bringing in that this perhaps reveals the tendrils of multi-directional relationships. Any response to that, Mansoor, or anyone?
Anyone wants to share, or I can respond? As I mentioned at the beginning, we are talking about the universe as a network, and that's the structure of the network. When we talk about nonlinear network and a relationship, we are talking about universal relationship that applies to any network or any relationship or any activity that we have. So this is the most simplicity of a system, and is the application. So I didn't quite understand exactly what's part, what do you need to, what else is that in that question that I didn't get it right, because I couldn't hear about it.
That's fine. Thank you, Mansoor. I'd like to move on now. I think, Umar, did you have anything more to add? Any questions or comments to bring into the conversation at this point?
Yes, I do. I have one question for Mansoor. Mansoor, I was looking at your article titled The Principles of Unconditional Love. And in this presentation, you have talked about thinking process. You are focused on the cognitive side of life. But in this article, you talk about feeling processes parallel to the logical processes. So if you could reflect briefly on that, that would be great.
Yes, as we know, first of all, when we look at the Earth or look at the Sun with the perspective of how living system behaves, Earth takes us 365 days around the solar system, provides us all things that we are consuming and enjoying too. And it does not ask how we do treating Earth, unconditional love. Or sun goes through a million degree of heat inside her belly to create photons to send it to us, to use it for different actions that we have, because that's a source of energy that we are using in different forms. And it does not ask how, even though I'm bringing this to you with a lot of pain, how you do, what you're doing with it. Are you killing each other, or you're using it for the betterness of Earth and yourself and human being? It's unconditional love that the whole system behaves on. And if we dig into the spiritual experiences, which is the most advanced experience of human being, when you're completely disconnected from self, that elusive separation that we have, and you become one with the universe, is a feeling of love and joy. And we have seen that not only as those spiritual experiences or mystic experiences of human being, but we have seen it in the near-death experiences, that how joyful and how lovely that stage is when you are really, temporarily dead actually. So basically this feeling of this universe at the same time is unconditional, is a very love perspective. And actually, one of the scientists that wrote the book, The Stroke of My Mind, she was a Harvard scientist, that she somehow left from the stroke, she lost her left side brain, linear brain, and for temporarily the right was activated more. And she was thinking and she was feeling that process of love and everything too. And it's been now, find in several articles now it's coming up too. And one of the problems that we have is our expectation that we created through our linear logic and predictability that we created. And that normally we are expecting something rather than when have unconditional love with any in our practice of daily practice with any network that we are participating in. And another thing is when our left side linear brain is dominating, we are not activating our right side that is connected to our heart. And as we know lately, that heart is another cognitive system. It's not only brain that we receive information. Heart is not only a pump, but it has it's a cognitive system that intuitively brings the information to our system, and the brain and heart and other cells work together to be a cognitive system as a network rather than only one, even though brain is being the dominant one, and the cooperation of right and brain and heart and other organs would be the ultimate potential of cognitive understanding and process. And this is something that we are now experiencing, and even most of the spiritual movements, and they are feeling it, but they could not even explain it through the linear logic and science. And this nonlinear science is explaining to us that how is a living system and how behaves according to the self-organized system process that we now know, and how the unconditional love is the feeling, and the when we really connect with the earth or the universe and forget about this elusive separation that we created through our self-consciousness process.
Thank you, Mansoor. And we have a question from one of our participants related to what is holding us back in putting the principles of living systems into practice. What is the largest or first bottleneck or block that holds us back from putting these principles into practice?
It's a linear logic and then linear relationship that we created. We are just, that's why now we are finding out that that linear logic and the relationship that we created, which was the approximate model that we created through a self-conscious process. And then according to that those relationship, which is self-assertiveness, short-term gain and all this too, and liability management and domination and all this, we are models that we created, economic, politics, environmental activities, are based on those relationships. Within our body is that domination of left side is there too. And by shifting this relationship within our body network first, and then apply it to any network that we are participating, is the key to that. Go through this shift of this linear world, which is more chaotic, more uncertain. Through that, we can go successfully past this transaction to become human God, become human that it's a higher conscious, higher potential, and bring that potential that we discussed at the beginning, that we are byproduct of the process. So basically, it's a linear mind, linear logic, linear relationship that is hiding us to participate on that level in body network and any network that we are participating.
Thank you, Mansoor. We're nearing the end of our time, but I want to bring our panel back to see if anyone has any questions, things to add. One comment here that I think is quite apropos, that thinking and behavior that is based on the individual perhaps is leaning towards the crisis. With that, with anything that anyone else has to add or comment, let's open the floor. I'll open all the mics. The audio won't be great by doing that, but at least I'll be able to hear everybody. So let's try to minimize background noise if you can. Okay, go ahead.
I would just add that another element of linear thinking is thinking of things as overly static, or thinking of things as nouns rather than verbs, as Becky said. And then if you do that, then you kind of get into that like reductionist, oh, this thing's causing that. And you're just looking at inputs into a system, perhaps, instead of like the vast interdependencies. And so Bucky said it very well. He said, I live on Earth at present. I don't know what I am. I know that I'm not a category. I'm not a thing, a noun. I seem to be a verb, an evolutionary process, an integral function of the universe. And so per the question around like bottlenecks, I think it's important that we all kind of like, whenever we can, kind of question, oh, am I thinking of myself as like a one noun static thing, or like blaming or seeing someone else similarly, and not like appreciating the co-emergence of everything and all of our interactions, and especially in this like radicalized, polarized world where we all feel like we're not getting through to people, and so we have to yell because we feel like we're like talking to a brick wall, like getting into the nuance and really like seeing everyone who, is interplaying within that system and seeing that co-emergence. And I don't think we've mentioned it, but Adrienne Marie Brown's book, Emergent Strategy, talks about a lot of these same themes in kind of a frame around strategy. So I really recommend that. Thank you.
Good. Well, we're at time. Mansoor, did you have something to add? I can't hear you. Let's see if we can find a way to get your microphone back on.
Yes, I may.
Go.
Yes. Yeah, as far as you know, we divide with the linear mind, we divide the time, which is eternal, to past and future. And always we are either, because of that defensive nature of the linear mind, either we are worried about the past, bringing guilt about our action in the past, or worried about the future rather than being in the moment. And that's another issue of the linear approximated mind that we created. And second problem is, since it's quantitative, we see something that is not right, or we don't think that is right with someone, if it's exaggerated so much, like in our today's system that we see it in the statements, and we don't see that that is because of quantitative and defensive nature of linear mind. We don't see it that those quantities, that those qualities, that they are not good. We carry it too. And when we eliminate ours because quantitatively small on that prejudice or self-assertiveness or all those linear relationships, this protective nature does not allow us to see those bad behaviors within us, to purify ourselves and become a better person, rather than make a judgment over other people. First, make a judgment about ourselves and see that within us at the same time too.
And Nico, I wanted to give you an opportunity to amplify the post you made in the chat about utopians and prototopians.
Yeah, I was mentioning that there's this new concept that has been brought up recently called protopia, which is, instead of imagining utopias, which are places that are not real, and they're great to set a course of action and some inspiration, but what we really need to be aiming to build are protopias, which are places that are slightly better than our current ones, and increase in small increments, and so slowly and step by step we can build systems that over time become much better than the ones we have. We were talking about this relating to the fascinating question about how we can use living systems philosophy to address the mental health crisis that we're living. And I was also sharing with Ilaria that I think that the answers are still in nature. It's about falling back into natural rhythms, about listening to our surroundings, being able to connect with what we have around us, and mostly, I think, listening to a basic need of human beings, which is human connection and creating mutual aid networks of support.
Great, well, thank you, Nico. So in the couple of minutes we have left, happy to open it up for any remaining questions, thoughts, comments?
Yes,
Umar, please.
yes. There's just one thing I didn't know about Mansoor. I don't think a lot of people know that Mansoor has a background in engineering and business studies. And I found it very fascinating how, from very linear way of looking at things, you have this system, you have developed this systems thinking, and it is really amazing. Thank you for letting me be a part of this. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Umar. Anyone else?
It's a main.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, it's okay, Mansoor. Go ahead. I can go after you.
The challenge that we have, how could we explain the simplicity that exists through the very complex system logically, with a linear logic that is always has a shortcut to explain? And that's the main challenge that we have. How could we go deeply to understand a linear system through a linear mind, and at the same time, linear mind becomes self-aware of shortcomings at the same time too. So it's a challenge, but that's the reason we need to have more artistic way of showing it, to be able to communicate it with the more people, and simplify it and then bring it out. And one thing that I could add to that unconditional love is, when we look at the systemic thinking, by becoming observant rather than judgmental, it can forgive the past, because forgiveness is another factor that comes with the system theory. Because if it's not judgmental, then we don't have any deterministic idea that this is wrong because of this or that, and we see it as a process that has to go through that process to come here. And that gives us the value of not to judge and not to blame. And when we don't blame, then we can practice unconditional love in our daily connections and in a higher scale of social connections, and that brings peace and more prosperity to human beings.
And in line with this desire to help simplify and clarify, we're just going to share in the chat now a link to a project that one of our partners, the Gray Area Foundation for the Arts, who's also supporting with the Living Systems Collaboratory, and myself worked on. It's called The End of You, and it was an entire exploration into creating an immersive experience that was about Gaian systems. A longtime friend and collaborator of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, David McConville and Don Danby, were also heavily involved in this project. And it was an incredible experiment in supporting a group of 12 artists, primarily working with us and working on looking at how do we translate the more than human world and dissolve this barrier between our living systems and our human systems. And so it was a really beautiful experiment and exploration, and there's a lot of really great work there. So definitely recommend checking it out. And this mission of how do we help crystallize, clarify, and distribute these messages as blueprints from the earth to the way that we operate is deeply embedded in the work of the Buckminster Fuller Institute, of the Design Science Studio, Virtual. The Design Science Studio is an educational incubator for so many artists and creators who are live with us here today. And this larger, broader community and network that is all committed to building a world that works for 100% of life over the course of the next 10 years. So we're so excited and honored to be on this mission together. And if you want to join and collaborate in any way, the doors are open. We would love to collaborate, work together. Whether you have an organization you're interested as a creator, you want to support, just reach out, and we'll drop links in the chat now as well. And we're so excited for you guys to learn more about all of the incredible artists and advisors and this broader community that's on this mission together for the course of the Design Science decade.
I did want to say one thing. I just wanted to say thank you to Mansoor for expanding our minds today and really helping us to open our non-linear minds to think deeply on how we can cooperate together and how we can all live into the moment. So thank you.
Thank you, everyone. To be continued.
Yes, thank you
Thanks.
all. Thank you,
Bye for now.
Have a wonderful day.
And also, I have a few sites that they can go through and go through the details, understanding if anybody is interested to know more and more details. We can share that, maybe Roxy can share it with you, and that way you will have access to more detailed information.
Thank you so much, Mansoor. Bye, everybody.